All right, let's get started. Call meeting to order. Let's start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Anybody listening, it would be, please go vote if you haven't. First thing on the agenda is the consent. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns?
No.
All right. All in favor? Any against? Okay. Then we'll move on to board, the president and vice president reports. Just a couple of things. Elliot and I attended dinner for Lower Westchester, or Lower Hudson Valley, actually. And the presenters basically were talking about sort of the history of foundation aid. It was really eye-opening, at least to me, because the original foundation aid was supposed to not really balance education. It wasn't supposed to be, well, Millbrook should get an extra 100,000 and Pine Plains should get less, 100,000 less, because, you know, we have this number and we have to balance. It was the constitutional right of our students to have a legitimate education, and the funding for that, for the state aid for that, was supposed to, and did originally, come from the state. As the presenter was saying, Governor Hochul was their hero for the first couple of years, because that's what she did. How much do they need? What are their, what are their actual needs because of their wealth levels? And the first couple of years, that's how it was decided. It had nothing to do with, well, if I take it from there, I have to give it over here. And then the pandemic, and then the budget crisis, and now we're basically rob Peter to pay Paul. And they're trying to come up with a new formula for foundation aid. They're trying to push that to the state, because the state still wants to try to make minor tweaks to the old formula, which basically doesn't serve anybody, really. There were a lot of questions. There was a lot of discussion about regionalization and how that's going to sort of affect this whole argument that, if you can't get people to play ball, then just take the power away from them. One of the regionalization proposals has basically BOCES running the school districts. And our budget would be set by BOCES. Basically the Board of Education would just kind of become a nice meeting every other Tuesday for us to maybe have coffee or something. I'm being a little facetious, but not much. It got pushed back. Now they're trying to also get us, meaning all boards, in front of representatives, and in preparing for a meeting with the governor. It started out like fairly nice, and then it sort of got, people, you could tell everybody was basically angry about it all. So, I mean, it's going to be, we've already been asked to join this advocacy group to they take the top items that are out there and how to fight them. Fight them together as the county, as Westchester and Dutchess County together. So, it was very, very interesting, but very disheartening in some cases, because you can see there really is, there's no interest in overall equity and making sure that our students have good, fundamentally funded education. It's more about, hey, there's a line item, let's see, that's all we have, so let's, divvy it up. Elliot, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I agree with everything you said. The only thing that I would add is, there was a lot of discussion about the components of the existing foundation aid formula and how archaic and outdated the data is. We're looking at 2000 census data, poverty number or measures that are 20-something years old. And really no discussion about the cost of educating our children, especially those with specific needs beyond general education standards. So there's a lot of, looking at what they think we're entitled to based on very old data, and not a lot of discussion about what we need to educate the kids we have today and prospectively. And there was also, in the previous formula, not much consideration of the expenses that continue to grow beyond our control. And that's, Perry and I spoke about, out of our entire budget, when we present the general fund budget to the board, we always say that roughly 80% of this budget is spoken for beyond our control. And so none of that was discussed in the foundation aid formula. So I think there's a lot of work to do. It was encouraging to see how much horsepower is going into advocating for it to be done well. But unfortunately, I think we have to be very intentional and conservative with our budget approach this coming year specifically, because we just don't know where it's going to land.
There was, it's interesting because there's almost zero recognition of the increase in special ed, in the increase in IEPs, and the increase in just paperwork coming out of the state. None of that seemed to, well, and again, it's a formula that's what, probably 10, 15 years old, more than that. So you almost can understand why it looks like that, but why the two gentlemen that were there that are pushing the state, they filed a lawsuit originally against the state, and then once foundation aid was settled and they didn't take it from one district to another, then they basically said, we'll stop pursuing the lawsuit unless it falls apart, and then we'll go back again. So we talked with a couple of folks at this dinner about joining their advocacy group. Worst case, I told them that, if nothing else, I would join it. I would drag Elliot with me, make Caroline do all the work, but
That's different than anything else.
yeah, there you go. But like I said, it's really, when you get right down to it, this whole discussion of regionalization, it basically says that every school district in New York would become part of a region, and they would be, again, basically managed by BOCES. And I can't imagine anyone thinking that that's going to come out better than it is right now. So stay tuned. Just wanted to give you some feedback on that. I think I got a note from Gully about meeting with somebody next week or the week after. So we'll just have to keep yelling as loud as we can. And I also wanted to just, I know that it went out on the on the Blazer statue and the donation of the services that went into fixing a little bit of the welding that over the years has needed some attention. And really posting the thing up there, I think it looks wonderful. So I just wanted to mention that. Anything from you, Chris?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Porter and Mrs. McCarthy for helping the seniors paint the parking spots on Saturday. It was a good time. Playing music and painting for a few hours. My back still hurts, but it's all good. It was a good time. So, thank you.
As a vice president, you're not supposed to actually do that. You're supposed to command them.
Never choice.
All right.
As a dad.
Yeah.
You get sucked into a whole lot of things.
All right. Next superintendent's report, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you. So I'll actually start with what Terry said. Just another special thank you to Terry Joshi, the trustee of Maryland Uphell's estate, for the donation of the Blazer sculpture. It was originally purchased from the artist Tomas Fernandez, and a special thanks to Chris Hall, who is a parent in the district from Stronghold Systems, for donating the labor to update, transport, and securely install the sculpture on our main campus. So for anyone out there that has not seen it, if you're in the main parking lot and you look up towards the athletic fields, it's right there. It can be seen from the athletic fields. It can also be seen prominently from the parking lot. So thank you to everyone that was involved in making that happen. It was, a complete donation, and we're so excited to have it on our campus. It just is an awesome addition. And it was almost kismet that it was right here in town, to join our school community. So I wanted to just go through a few things, but I think I'm going to start in parallel to the comments that Perry just made. I did not attend the dinner that Perry and Elliot had gone to, because I was actually in Albany working with the New York State Council of School Superintendents Legislative Liaison Committee, discussing many of this very similar topics. So not surprising, zero emission buses was quite a large agenda item in the discussion. So there's some changes that are expected to be approved through the governor's office, one of which will have an impact on the amortization period for the buses. So actually expanding how long you can pay off the buses after purchase. So right now, I believe it's a period of 5 years. They're looking to potentially expand that to 8 years. Which is also one of those things where people are kind of scratching their heads a little bit, because we don't really know what the anticipated useful life of one of these buses is. So we certainly don't want to be paying something off when it's no longer useful. So again, just one of the things that's being discussed. There was a discussion related to removing the requirement for voter approval for the purchase of these buses. And so there was sort of a philosophical conversation around that, whether that would be beneficial to school districts and or not. So one of the things that I think is true is that if there's a voter approval requirement and we put it out there and the voters say no, there's nothing that we can do. We don't have the unilateral authority to make a purchase like that. And so removing voter authority or voter approval really would just require school districts to comply, but maybe not even have the money to do that. And that's really kind of a big issue. It was echoed by many of the districts that perhaps our advocacy needs to push more away from, not complying, and say we're willing to comply, but we actually don't have a product that can meet our needs right now, which is the case of many of the districts in our county specifically. We actually don't have an electric vehicle option at this point that can service our runs. And many of those school districts also say that that's just for regular runs. It would be a virtual impossibility if we had to release early to be able to do our morning runs, charge the buses, and go back out and do the PM runs, especially the length of our runs. It wouldn't be possible, and not just in Millbrook, and many of the districts in the area. We talked about many different possibilities of incentives from the state if districts were able to, share costs for like lifts, the electrical capacity, et cetera. Some of this comes right down to a national grid issue where there's literally just not enough power in the areas to be able to actually pull this off. Many of the districts would also have a significant cost of getting easements to be able to bring power to where they need it. On some of this land, many districts would have to purchase land to be able to put forth, a proposition to even build a facility that's able to, lift, repair, and or charge these buses. State Ed has unilateral authority at this point in time to delay this as late as 2029. However, there's been, moves on that so far. And so at this point, it still is a, requirement. It's a legislative, requirement at this point. So we're all looking at how we're going to try and make this happen, even though it doesn't really appear to be something that's feasible. There was definitely concerns about bus monopolies coming forward, which would escalate the cost because there simply just are not enough manufacturers to do this. And so if busing companies, some of the like larger outfitters decided to get ahead of this and purchase many buses at once and try and do a contract for services, then it would be a case where we would be stuck paying whatever astronomical prices. And again, that's going to bankrupt the districts because we simply don't have the money for this. And so there's lots of things about this that came up, not many of which are, really new. Except for, as I said, that again, we pushed the conversation that has there been any conversation on the behalf of the state with these vendors, with these, energy suppliers, have they done any of their homework to see if we're all just crazy and this actually can be done? And there was silence on that. There's been none of that. In direct conversations with representatives from the governor's office, we talked about the potential for a cell phone ban. It was somewhat of a circular conversation that sounded something like there will be guardrails, but local controls how to accomplish this. It will likely be a bell-to-bell ban on any internet-enabled devices, with carve-outs for students with IEPs who may need them. It would be the school district's requirement to store phones. And then we circled back and it said, there'll be no restriction on possession, only use. So it seems like they have a lot of like very early ideas on a lot of things, not many of which are fully fleshed out. And yet there's somewhat of a deadline coming where these things are going to be put upon schools to execute with not a lot of guidance as to how we're supposed to do that. So we are obviously pushing for some kind of flexibility, maintaining local control and whatever is required for it to be low cost and or to have funding associated with it, which we say, but that doesn't typically happen. And so mental health was a huge issue, which is part of what this cell phone issue is being connected to. And I don't think anybody disagrees that it's not necessarily healthy for kids and or adults to spend their whole lives on their phone. We really kind of pushed it back to the governor's office for consideration of like what's happening when they're not in school. Because a lot of what we deal with, I mean, and Rick is here, he could tell you, a lot of what we deal with in terms of, technology related infractions or whatever, a lot of the drama part of the infractions happen outside of school. They don't necessarily happen during the school day, but they trickle into the school. And so we're managing, far into the communities, which is something that I think schools have kind of been grappling with for quite some time now. But cell phones have certainly made that an issue. And then there was many other conversations related to this regarding like, well, on one hand, the governor is telling us that, we can't, the governor and the commissioner's office are telling us like, we don't want suspensions, we want alternatives to suspensions. And then at the same time, they're saying, but you have to ban and provide consequences for kids who have cell phones. So I just feel like more and more there's like this crisscross of, is anybody talking to the other? Because both things can't be true. And then what happens when, these things happen, it becomes insubordination, we're issuing consequences, and then, you know, we're getting suspensions overturned and returned back, you know, with, like expungement and so what do we do, right? So it's just no answers for that. So we also had a long conversation about the 211 waiver, which is for, retired, folks who are retired from New York State, come back and work in retirement. There's currently a $35,000 a year, max on their earnings up until they reach a certain age. You know, we talked about the fact that at this point in time, it's absolutely necessary for this waiver to continue, because, you know, fortunately, we're not in a circumstance where we have many of these employees in districts, but there are local districts who have a large number of employees who are on the 211 waiver, and upstate, it's, you know, some districts have like double digits number of people who are on this 211 waiver, even in teaching positions, because they simply just can't find anyone. So their recently retired employees are coming back kind of as a favor, like, yeah, until you find someone, but they're not finding anybody. So it's been a couple years. It's only gotten worse after COVID. You know, just to put in context, a lot of the safety and security employees in the county come from retired law enforcement agencies, and they can retire fairly young, right? That's after like 20, I don't know if it's 20, 25 years, something like that. So these individuals are pretty young, and, you know, kind of have a whole next career ahead of them. But they're capped in terms of their earnings. And I know it's the same for some bus drivers and other positions as well. So we had a lot of conversation about that. Is there a possibility of either lowering the age for maximum earning or making it like a certain number of years that they can do before they turn 62? You know, there was lots of different conversations that went around about that. Could they raise the amount of money that they could make it reasonable? There was some conversations about, you know, is there a portion of the TRS that, or ERS earnings that we could pay into the pension system to be able to have these people back? So there was lots of recommendations, conversations. It didn't really land anywhere. There was just a lot of, okay, thanks, you know, we'll take that into consideration. We talked about civil service. We talked about poverty rates and how where a lot of school districts are struggling because funding is tied to the poverty rates. And now with the CEP, many schools are having a hard time getting accurate data as to how many of our kids' families actually are struggling. But you know, not surprising, but it does impact all of our funding when we don't have that accurate data. We talked about the temperature bill. They have 6 weeks to act on it. So far, it has not been acted on. They're exploring the idea of having protocols and ensuring that there's an articulation to district staff, that would be the requirement. The governor's office has heard the concerns from the field. What that means, I have no idea. Obviously, there was a suggestion from the floor that they ask us what we're already doing and stop telling us what we need to do, because, you know, it's not the same for everybody. Not everybody's in the same, you know, position to be able to manage this. But almost everybody has some consideration for if it's excessively hot or excessively cold. And so they talked about that. They also talked about what will happen if this does come to pass, where, you know, in terms of like the runway for state approvals for any capital project related to HVAC work, the supply chain issues that it would cause. We just had a whole, you know, session talking about electrical grid issues, and here we're talking about let's add more strain on the electrical grid. So it was a lot of stuff like that. We did discuss special education funding, so very similar to what they were discussing in the other meeting, and how the reimbursement thresholds for STAC, so that's a system for tracking students who are in special ed services, typically outside of the district. Right now, I believe the threshold is it has to be over $65,000 or something like that before we start to get reimbursement. And they said that's just simply ridiculous. It needs to be lowered. We have so much money, right, that we're spending on making sure that students have everything that they need. As Elliot and Perry kind of indicated, the responsibility of schools has been broadened so much in terms of mental health, social, emotional, well-being and support for students. Even including, 2 meals a day kind of thing for more districts than ever before. Just the unfunded mandates are outrageous. There's, more and more reporting, more and more accountability, but there's really not any money to support it. So these conversations, they were happening far, far away from each other, but they were really in parallel with different parts of the state. So the organization that I was in is regional, so pretty much every region in New York State had representation. And I know that this was much more local to this region, but either way, they're all having the same conversations. And though the impacts may be slightly different, they're pretty much all over the state. We did today have an incident where there was a regularly scheduled lockdown drill at Alden Place. And so due to a technology malfunction, that triggered an initiation of a lockdown in the middle school at the same time. So once those drills are commenced, we follow the protocols as if it was the real thing. And at that moment, we didn't really know if it was or was not the real thing. Once we were able to figure out what had happened, we did follow the protocol that we used to end the drill so that everybody involved knew that it was a drill, that everyone was communicated with directly by administration. And, all's well that ends well. We're working on the fix for the technology issue. And, I have to say that I was really grateful that everyone responded, took it very seriously. Everyone responded appropriately. We did notify the community as quickly as we could, given the circumstances. And I didn't get any feedback. So, I appreciate everyone's support, just understanding that these things do happen, unfortunately, and we respond the best we can as quickly as possible. In terms of instruction, we've had our consultants here. They've been working with our elementary teachers on literacy instruction. And also Ms. Lattenville presented to the Elm Drive teachers regarding Lumio, which is the tool to create more interactive lessons. So that's been very exciting. We've also had a lot of support at Alden Place. Counselors from the high school and the middle school are rotating their schedule and going down there throughout the 6-day cycle. So they've been in classrooms throughout October, November, delivering lessons surrounding academics, career counseling, and a variety of different SEL activities. We've also had Dora Celestino, who is a counselor from the Council for Addiction Prevention and Education, who completed her final week of working with 5th grade students on a curriculum called Too Good for Drugs. And Dora also will be delivering a similar but grade level specific curriculum for our 6th graders in the spring. There will also be an after school follow-up presentation that will be available to students who down in the Alden school as well. So more information about that will be forthcoming. That will be an after school voluntary program. Both staff is continuing to engage in training regarding the classroom habitudes. And so this month's focus was on self-awareness, and next month we will be focusing on curiosity, I believe. And then the cybersecurity governance team met last week to discuss the NIST cybersecurity framework with DC BOCES and Rhinebeck Central School District. We did a baseline assessment of the team's awareness of cybersecurity and reviewed the district systems that we've already had in place to keep our information safe. And so I'm sure you'll be hearing about that at next meeting when Elliot and Amy report out. Unfortunately, I missed that meeting as well because I was at the liaisons meeting, but I am actually very interested in some of what I've been reading in terms of the updates from that meeting. The E&L department recently attended a workshop on supporting learners through the writing process. So they had identified that, as I had mentioned at last meeting, as something that the students need the most help on. So that's where they're really working towards. And it's a targeted intervention that will provide students some skills needed for their annual exam, the NIST. The E&L teachers also went to a roundtable with the neighboring districts, Red Hook, Rhinebeck, and Pine Plains. Pine Plains hosted, so thank you to that. And they also created a stakeholder support group involving community stakeholders and how to support our English language learners here in the district. We have parent-teacher conferences this week, tomorrow night and Thursday. So thank you to all of the families who have signed up and will be attending. And then there's been some Blue Blazer recognition throughout the district. On Elm Drive on Friday, they celebrated the students who were selected for demonstrating responsibility and introduced their new focus on gratitude. And then we want to just thank everyone who donated to our non-perishable food items for the holiday season. And also I do want to say thank you, a special thank you to Hannaford in Wappingers, who gave us significantly discounted turkeys for our families and a gift card to shop for non-perishable items to make sure that none of our families went without. And also, you know, Mrs. Lynch and Miss O'Connell worked with the Alden and Middle School Interact Club, and they also did additional collections and supported those students working directly with Moronas, who provided turkeys to some of those families as well. So thank you to Hannaford and Moronas and all those that made that possible. Mrs. Lynch is also working with Kelly Domino in the guidance office at the middle school to they created a new survey for students who are interested or expressing interest in potentially attending one of the private schools. So when they come in to get information for an application, they're working with them. And they've also, so that's for 8th graders, but they're also working with 6th and 7th graders to get more information in an effort to retain students. So I know this has been an ongoing conversation. I do have some data for the board, but that's also additional steps that we're taking to try and get ahead of it, try and understand what it is that families and students are looking for, and trying to match them with services and or programming support here in district. And then I did want to give a shout out to our pre-K program. We are actually hosting a regional superintendent's meeting on Friday because news of how successful our pre-K program has spread around the area. And so they are coming here so that they'll have an opportunity to also visit the pre-K classrooms and a couple of their other classrooms where the teachers have volunteered to have visitors on Friday. So, yep. And that's all I have.
Oh, the misstep with locking down the middle school, was it software or hardware or
I
what?
think we probably should talk about that. in executive.
Which one, yeah.
Okay. Okay, questions?
Thank you. How did Jill and Jewett States, or are you?
Yeah, I left
reporting on
that for Rick.
Oh, then we'll wait.
Julie
I'm
Thunder.
so
It's like,
excited.
yep, you're gonna wait.
That's it.
I skipped it.
Leave it to the very end.
Any other questions for Caroline?
Teed it up for you.
Okay.
Good evening. Thanks for the brief opportunity. So in addition to thanking Mr. Porter and Mrs. McCarthy, I'd like to thank all of you for your approval and your support for our seniors for this little project. I know they were very excited about it, so we really appreciate that. However, I do have to have a word with that, Mr. Porter. So the approval process was that they had to share their designs with me prior to painting, and when I pulled in Monday morning, my parking.
I approve
I
that.
might have overruled.
I-
I'm gonna go.
Understood.
A different
Understood.
approval.
I felt special.
So at the high school, we have been working on systems in place to match the work of the district presented in the beginning of the school year. So to date, we have been working with our teachers on the portrait of a graduate and connecting this work to our reading that we, along with other buildings, are doing with our teachers on classroom habits and looking at 1% changes that we could all make to ensure that we're providing the necessary experiences and supports for all of our students. So the classroom habits that I just mentioned is the work that we're connecting by reading classroom habitudes. And this is how we explicitly teach and model the habits that we want to see in our students and make sure that it's happening in all of our classrooms throughout the building. So overall, we're off to a really good start at the high school. In addition, thanks to Dr. Watkins, based on the feedback from many of our teachers, they've been asking for some departmental time to dive into some data. And we've been utilizing that time to really look at some noticing and wonderings, and making changes based on the review of our past Regents exams. And the work of the students that, they're sitting in front of them today to address some of the shortcomings, in some of our areas. So we've used our beginning of the year benchmark assessments, Datamate, they've been very good resources. But then again, thank you for Dr. Watkins. In addition to that, we are in the beginning stages of also utilizing Edmentum. And for the purposes at the high school, it's an individualized learning program specifically where teachers can create adaptive learning programs, specifically where they create learning paths to meet each student's individual needs. Not all students are using this, but those that do are benefiting from it. And it's a really good starting point. And I'm really excited to see it put to use and its potential expansion, excuse me. In terms of safety, we completed all of our minimum required drills prior to the new year. We were actually the first school in the district to have a safety audit from Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. That took place in mid-September. They were very helpful, and also and it was also really good for us to hear that we're doing really well compared to neighboring schools and districts. That in conjunction with working with Mr. Mullins, just to make sure that we're up to compliance with all the things that we need to address in terms of safety here. We are also in the process of discussing our reunification drill here at the high school. That's likely going to take place in the spring. We're in the beginning phases of planning for that. In terms of highlights, I'll talk about Dylan in a second, but it was just overall very exciting to see the number of students participating in fall sports. Overwhelming amount of students. It was really great to see them out in the fields and in the courts and involved in our clubs as well. Our fall teams overall had a great season. Specifically, I just want to highlight volleyball. They advanced to the sectional championship, and I know traditionally that's not necessarily a big deal because we're accustomed to winning sectional titles and contending for a state championship. But honestly, Coach Stoliker did a phenomenal job with our young ladies. We did not have one senior on the roster, and if you saw them at the beginning of the season, honestly, we didn't even know if they were going to qualify for the sectional tournament. So not only did they improve and qualify for the sectional tournament, they advanced all the way to the sectional championship before losing to the Mount Academy, which is contending for a state championship this coming weekend. So kudos to Coach Stoliker and all the girls on a great season. Yes, congratulations to Dylan Vasquez. He competed in the New York State Cross Country Championship this past Saturday. Unfortunately, he did not race as well as he wanted to. I finished with an overall time of 18 minutes and 20 seconds. That's a little short of his personal best, but congratulations to him because he's been outstanding for all those years that he's been participating, and he still has another year to make up for it. So congratulations to him as well. Winter sports started yesterday, so we're looking forward to a successful winter season. And lastly, I am happy to share that we have a drama club production this spring, The Addams Family. So it's very exciting. Audition started yesterday. And this is definitely something to be on the lookout for March. And lastly, I should also put in a plug for, we're hosting a blood drive on Monday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you're around, swing by, if you could donate.
Questions? Just one on the portrait of a student. Have you seen progress in defining these, I'll call them non-traditional students, you know, where they're working on, you know, BOCES and they're, it seemed like that was part of, there were students that would be the standard academic, there would be the students that were, you know, working for a living, I'm not sure, you know, the basically TCI, but there seemed to be gaps in that portrait, in the definition of that portrait. Have you seen that start to close?
Well, I don't know maybe I don't understand your question correctly, but in terms of like the characteristics, like the characteristics of the graduates, so all the schools, like kind of identified all those characteristics. And I think specifically at the high school, knowing that a lot of our students have more than just, that type of experience or learning experiences and expanding to that type of work.
So I think there's two different pieces. What Rick is talking about, the portrait of a graduate is a component of what you're talking about, which is the Blue Ribbon Commission that has put a proposal forth to the Board of Regents to change the graduation requirements. So the portrait of a graduate is to, like Rick is saying, is to really carve out what do we want to be true of every single child when they graduate from Millbrook Central School District. So we did a lot of work as an administrative team over the summer. And I think we kind of came up with like 3 buckets. Sort of like self-management, resource management, and relationship management, and then we put different skills that we wanted our kids to absolutely have and have practice using before they go out into the world. So then we brought it back to, and jump in here, we brought it back to the staff at each building and sort of talked to them about what do you envision? And like, obviously Rick's being the last stop on the train, right? If we want this to be true of all of our students when they leave Millbrook High School, what does that look like when they leave the middle school? And then what would that look like when they leave Alden? And what would that look like when our earliest learners make their first transition from Elm into 3rd grade? So we've really done a lot of work around identifying what that would look like. And then actually, what Rick is saying is that we've tried to tie everything together and create a system because of the work we did with the atomic habits and thinking about the small incremental changes that we can commit to that would put us that much closer to our goals by the end of the year, by the end of graduation, by the end of whatever. And part of what we've been looking at is called classroom habitudes, where things like curiosity, perseverance, all of those things, and creating these common threads that we're talking about with our youngest learners, and we're talking about with our oldest student to be exiting graduates. So we're really trying to look at the system as a whole, and how we build, kiddos who are ready to go out and tackle whatever is next for them, whether it's college or career, armed forces, whatever that is.
I
Yeah,
apologize. I thought you had
yeah.
mentioned that in the technology committee meeting last week, so I just thought based on some of the previous principals reporting out that this was what we talked about, so I'm just talking
Yeah,
about how.
no, I misspoke. I was thinking
It's
of,
fine.
because
Graduation requirements.
the graduate part
Yeah.
seems to be vague. At the, at the county level or wherever.
Yeah, it hasn't been officially implemented yet. It went before the Board of Regents last week, I think. And so we haven't heard anything specific, but what they're looking to do is sort of go back to the future and where there would be one high school diploma. And so that would be, based on I don't want to say minimum requirements because that sounds kind of demeaning, but there would be the requirements for graduation, and then anything else would be graduation with a designation. So like the civic seal or the seal of civic readiness, seal of biliteracy, students who are taking the Regents and getting what would have traditionally been known as like the advanced Regents designation or honors or AP, all of that will be designations. So there will be one high school diploma, and then you would basically get, when the athletes have the little stickers on their helmets because they do great things, you would have stickers on your diploma because you did great things. Yeah.
I have a question. The winter concerts, I know you have the high school one listed, and I believe Alden will be using the high school on 12-4. So I just wanted to make sure, I know there's a whole new lighting and sound system, which is fantastic. The last 2 summer, I guess spring concerts, the air wasn't working. Are we looking at everything ahead of time to make sure our community is
Yes.
comfortable?
So no, I appreciate the question and concern, but yeah, I'm glad to report that, yes, we have better lighting in the auditorium, we have better sound system in the auditorium, and Mr. Mullins has a good handle on the heating/cooling system in the auditorium.
Fantastic, thanks.
Cool. Any other questions?
And if we have that graduation again, it was pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Fingers
you.
crossed we'll be outside.
We always make it through that, right?
Thanks,
Of course you do.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Up next. Oh my God, that's a second sheet. Financials and warrants. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Questions, comments, concerns? Some other word? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, next is approve the correction action plan. We'll do the motion and then have it get a little more explanation. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, you wanna,
Sorry, I swallowed.
Mhm.
So this was the direct follow-up from our annual audit. There were two noted items for a correction. The first one we know are, well, they'll do the easy one. The easier one first is our school lunch fund or cafeteria or school lunch program. There was a concern about the consistency of inventory tracking. And so our new school lunch or school food service director, that title's changed recently, school food service director Jessica Wilcox has taken the lead on establishing a new inventory process that will reconcile daily production records with periodic full inventories of products and consumables in the department. So she's got a two-part process to address this, where they'll be reconciling regularly, and then we'll have all those records straightened out, and that is already in progress. She started doing that in October. The second audit recommendation, as you all know, we are carrying in excess of our 4% state allowable fund balance. And so the corrective action plan is, again, a two-part process based on what happens tonight at the vote. So with a positive vote, we will allocate all of the funds beyond the 4% that we're allowed to carry towards the capital project. There's roughly $1.6 million in excess of the 4% that we can put towards the project itself or into a reserve for future use and a future component of a project. Which leads us to the second option. Should we not receive a positive vote tonight, we can establish a capital reserve in May during our general election. As part of the general fund proposition, that will allow us to go ahead and put this money into fund balance vehicle, being a new capital reserve fund. And one of the questions that came up when we discussed this the last time is why wouldn't we expand the fund we have? And the short answer for that is capital reserve funds are time bound to 10 years. And so we've already had our the existing fund we have in place. It maximizes its authorization at 10 million. So we would have, the board would have to take action to increase it, but we cannot take action to extend it. So it would make more sense to just establish a new one should we not be able to put the cash directly towards the project with a positive vote tonight. And that's it.
questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Next is to accept a $1,000 donation from some of our community foundations in the Hudson Valley. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Comments?
Thank you.
It's very good. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Next is to accept a $1,500 donation from George T. Whalen Junior Foundation for scholarships. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I need space. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The next is to, do a motion to accept the letter of resignation for purpose of retirement of Thomas Lipka. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Comments, questions?
Thank you for
Good luck.
21 years.
Yeah.
Your retirement.
Enjoy your
Thank you
time.
for everything you've done for the district over the years.
Mm.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Any against? Public comment questions?
None.
No. None. All right, next is committee reports, the tech committee.
Okay, so tech committee met for the first time this year. We kind of broke the meeting up into two parts. We did our operational and kind of infrastructure part of the meeting. Mr. Schock was leading that conversation, and we did talk about some of the NIST compliance and cybersecurity initiatives for the district. You know, at a very broad level, we're talking about our student information system, parent communication, software available for teachers. Kim Lattenville's been very involved in helping us assess what software we have versus what we need, looking for redundancies and gaps in the servicing, in the software services that we offer. And that kind of flowed right into Kim taking the lead on the second part of the meeting, which was really focused on the student-facing work of the instructional technology team and what she's doing as our technology integrator with teachers, expanding offerings for instructional tech, providing trainings to teachers, making recommendations to us for new directions that we can go in with our software. So I think it was a really positive meeting overall. I know, Perry, you were part of the conversation. We did have some, you know, technology kind of touches so many different things that we had to lean into the data conversation. We had to lean into instructional planning, certainly safety and security. So we're trying to move forward this year, mindful that there's very much two fronts of that approach. And we want to make sure that we stay focused on the cybersecurity and infrastructure work, but also keep highlighting what we're doing in the classroom with our tech.
Yeah, I think if I could add a little bit, the first was, you know, during the pandemic, we basically, what do you need? Right? You know, and teacher X would say, I need this, and teacher Y would say, I need that. And they kind of do the same thing, only one's a little easier over here, but not as easy over there. It's kind of time to pause that and go back and say, okay, what subscriptions can we get out of, get away from? How can we get a more common platform? The other thing I thought was like a great conversation, because it was almost the characteristic of the entire industry was a discussion on AI. And you know, we had some teachers, oh, no, you can't. And personally, I think, what's the difference? If I can tell a kid to go Google 4 things on the internet, take those 4 things and make a connection, or I run an AI program that finds the 4, puts them there, as long as the child is understanding it. But I thought it was a really good conversation about like where schools are with AI, and not just public school, not just, you know, K-12, but colleges. Everybody's struggling with how far that's to go. So that was a really good meeting. I enjoyed it. And I think people learned a lot about what needs to be, you know, why are we sort of pausing things right now? That was good. Very good. Questions?
Thank you.
Policy committee.
Well, the policy committee had a pretty jam-packed agenda. There was lots of things that we were coming back together on: cash procedures in the building. So setting up systems for the cash that comes out of the school lunch drawers every day. And so Ashley took a lead on that, and Ashley in the business office took a lead, and she put together a draft proposal of the cash procedures, which got feedback from the committee. There'll be some updates, and then they'll be approved going forward. We also looked at the student attendance policy. And subsequent to this agenda meeting, I had a meeting with Mr. Sight, Ms. Mattis, who is the attendance secretary in the high school, and Mr. Cabello, because there's specific parts of the attendance policy that speak to high school credit bearing courses. And so some of Mr. Cabello's kiddos take high school credit bearing courses. So we had a long conversation about that. And so There will be some proposed changes to the attendance policy that will go back to the policy committee and eventually will land before the entirety of the board. We talked about student drivers because of the advice from the New York State Insurance Reciprocal. So speaking about drivers, specifically those who are driving within their school day. So kiddos who are going to like BOCES and stuff like that. So we're still working on hammering out some of those details. We discussed our fees for building and/or facilities use, I should say, because it's more than just our buildings. We talked about the early student voting requirements for registering early registration of student voters. And we talked that's probably Stephen Latino, so can you let him? And so the political signs on our property only because we had issues with folks posting signs on our school property. And so you know, basically, even though it is property of the school, the public school district, it is not public property. And so we got some clarification on that and just reviewed our policies relating to any signs being installed on the district property. And then also we discussed our McKinney-Vento policies with regards to homelessness, students experiencing homelessness or in temporary transitional housing. So some of those were more just looking at regulations, just looking at language, making sure that there are no changes, and some of them will in short order be coming before the board for approval and updates.
Very good. Questions?
Not a question, but a comment to piggyback on your AI conversation. When I attended NISBA at the end of October, there were so many talks on AI, and I went to many. And it's interesting, some districts are developing their own AI policies and some are not. And so that may be something that we might want to discuss at a future policy committee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just, I think it all comes full circle to what we were just talking about with the work that we're doing about like those classroom habits, right? I don't think anybody can deny there's so much information at students' fingertips. Like there really isn't a little nugget of information that you can't just Google, right?
Right.
And so we need to teach our kiddos to think critically, right? To synthesize information, because it's not just about memorizing everything, right? It's like, so how do I take in the world around me and make meaning of it and give it back in a meaningful way? So, you know, that's where I think a lot of these shifts are happening, and I think they're well overdue, to be honest with you. So I actually really like the direction some of this is going. But it's all related, you know, they seem like these standalone kind of policies and or experiences, regardless of what we're talking about, but they're really all related. And so that's it for the policy committee. On the second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll move to enrollment. Basically there for you know, your perusal.
Mhm.
Questions on enrollment? Okay. PTO report. Dina's not here tonight, so I think did you want to say something?
I don't know, did you go to the last meeting?
The last public one I did, I don't have my notes in front of me, but, wait a moment,
I wasn't there, actually.
No,
but-
I was like, wait a minute. where's my
I
phone?
could just leave it for
We'll
you.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll push it out.
Yeah, the only thing I do know is that they're having a float at the
Yes, they
yeah,
did
the
talk
Parade of
about the
Lights.
Parade of Lights.
And I know the president, Heather Osmond, sent an email out to all PTO members, inviting them to walk along in the float. So if anybody wants to do that, they can contact her or just the general PTO email, which I'm sure is on the website. That's only piece of info I have. Yeah.
MEF,
So our taste of mystery, which was, gosh, end of October, I think.
Seems like forever
It seems forever. was a huge hit. It was sold out, wonderful company, great food. The show was lively and entertaining. And thank you to Dr. Watkins and Ms. Hernandez for being there and spending your Saturday evening in support of MEF. And it was really a great group of, individuals from the community who participated in other MEF events, some people who just saw this taste of mystery and said, I, love the theme, I want to come. And so it's a great mix. So thank you. And then the new fundraiser, we have a meeting this Thursday, so I don't have all the details, but we're working on a gift wrapping at the library for 2 or 3 different days in December where people can bring in their gifts to, and then for a donation to get their gifts wrapped, right?
Sign me up now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It'll be
You'll have to have your
December
own
11th,
time slot.
December 18th, and a weekend slot, December 14th. At the Mildred Library
can't
in
shop
the
much
nonfiction
money.
room.
And you must have less than a pickup truck's load.
Can you wrap a puppy now?
Better look at
11,
that,
18,
And
and
Saturday.
And then 14th.
Great idea.
Yes, but more will be coming after Thursday's meeting.
Yeah, I was
in terms of
very
exact.
transparent about my wrapping leaves a little bit to be desired, but I could make a mean.
I think that's also nice for certain, I don't wanna give away this, for
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
who need,
Mhm,
yep, you know what I'm saying.
mhm.
There you go.
So I mean, very exciting. Yeah.
Very exciting.
Very good, very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right, future agenda items, you guys know, don't forget about the, workshop on the, I do this every day.
It's funny that you forgot. You're
But
not-
8th or 9th. I know it's coming, I just don't know what day.
I'm standing for a second, I'm like, I'm not ready to miss that.
The
Um,
night,
The night.
12/9, Monday? Yeah.
all right, next is, do I have a motion to go to executive session?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Just for anybody that might be listening, just because we go to executive session doesn't mean the meeting is ending. We may discuss things that result in an action to be taken in public. So when we come back, there may be more. With that, all in favor? Any against? Okay, all right. There we go. Anybody need 5? 10?
Hey, Elliot, just so you know, I didn't blow you off at the tech meeting. No one picked me up.